This is a true story from 35 years ago. I was teaching Army ROTC at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville in the early 80s. I was a captain in the Army at the time, and that was unlike any other assignment in my Army career. Working with the kids was great, but it was also entertaining at times. I remember one day one of the female cadets came into my office. She was wearing her uniform. I looked down and she had a large burn on one leg. I said, "Julie, what happened?" She said, "Well, I woke up late this morning. I was running behind and I was ironing my skirt while I was wearing it." Sometimes scoring 1,500 on your SATs doesn't equate to common sense. The University of Virginia ROTC program was unique. We had an exchange program at the University of Glasgow Officers Training Corps. Every summer, 12 Scottish cadets would fly over. I'd take them down to Fort Bragg to train with my students. We go back to Charlottesville, pick up 12 of my cadets, and fly over to Great Britain to train on the Salisbury Plain. The trip across the Atlantic was 8 hours, and it was interesting. We flew on an Air Force Reserve KC-135. That's a tanker. This tanker was designed to refuel Air Force jets in flight. There was a bubble that protruded below the fuselage, large enough for the boom operator to lie down in, and that boom operator could extend the boom inserted in the fuel tank of the jet trailing behind. Amazing to watch. However, the seating accommodations on that 135 were not first class. They were worst class. The seats were nothing but crisscross nylon straps, back up against the side of the fuselage, no padding, no way to recline. It was extremely noisy. We were all issued earplugs, but still it sounded like you were inside a dishwasher without the water for the whole trip, 8-hour trip. The only good thing is you could get up and walk around. I walked around once and went back to the boom operator's refueling station, found one of my cadets lying down in there asleep for the whole trip. We made it to the Salisbury Plain to the British Army camp. And if you've seen the movies, it was exactly like that. There was a regimental sergeant major. He was fond of saying, "Jolly good, jolly good." He wore a Johnny beret. He was a scrawny little guy. He had a huge handlebar mustache, and he had this elaborate carved wooden walking stick with silver filigree. He was right out of central casting. And every day we would stop training at 3:30 and convene in the officers' mess for tea. Imagine us sitting there in dirty fatigues, muddy boots, sipping tea from china, fine cups and saucers. After tea, we would go back out and train until dinner. The English dinner was nothing special, but the breakfast was a little unusual. It had the traditional eggs and bacon and sausage, but it had two other ingredients. Of course, it had English muffins, but there were two other ingredients. One was stewed tomatoes, and the other one was cold pork and beans. I could never get used to cold pork and beans at 6 a.m. in the morning. After dinner, we would also convene in the officers' mess again every evening for socializing and drinking. The Scots loved to party. One Saturday night, we had a one-piece party. The concept, you could only wear one piece of clothing. Now, some of the women took it easy. They just wore a dress with nothing under it. Some of the Scots wore a kilt with nothing under it. Some of my kids went pretty conservative also. They took a sheet, wrapped it around themselves. It was a toga. Then some of my male students wore their long black Army raincoats. They all looked like flashers, during the thing. I used a little more imagination for once in my life. I pulled out my Army-issued laundry bag. I opened the seams at each of the corners at the bottom, stuck my feet through it, and put the straps over my shoulder. Imagine me wearing this. Not a pretty picture. The evening before we were due to leave, we had a dinner where the senior officers exchanged gifts. They gave me, the British major gave me a silver chalice, but before he gave me the silver chalice to take back to UVA, they filled it to the top with straight Jim Beam. My task was to drink all of that in one motion. I managed to do it to the delight of my cadets, but I have no recollection of the rest of the evening.